And here we are. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another live with CricketSong. And today I have a familiar friend, Jasmyne Ambrosia.
Hello.
Yay. She's with us tonight. You can find links to her. I think it's her. I have her YouTube and I think I have your website listed. If not, I'll make sure or your Facebook. I know there's a couple of links listed. You can find her there. Definitely check out her YouTube channel if you haven't yet. Shame on you. So tonight we are talking about our duty as witch. We want to cover, what is our responsibility to our community as witch? Where should our boundaries lie within the community? And just because we can't do something, should we do something in all situations? And basically, are we our sisters and brothers keepers? Now, this is a very large topic, I think, and we may not be able to complete it in the hour. So I am very open to continuing this conversation in another live, because I think, at least for me, I don't have any definite opinions yet, and this is why I want to kind of talk it out, because I'm not sure for myself, and there have been situations where I come up to a point and I have to consider, what am I going to do here? So I want to discuss this. And I know Jasmyne has had situations that she can talk about as much as she wants in regards to her opinions on the topic too.
Yeah. And, I was going to say too, I have very strong
opinions.
I know. And I think anyone, if you have seen some of my videos, I think I make that pretty abundantly clear.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Where do we start?
I don't know, because, even in the situations, for you, is it every situation or are there, and I guess, the biggest thing is, I always come to a point and I'm like, okay, is this really any of my concern? This situation I may be witness to. Is this really any of my concern? And then it even flows into gatekeeping, the whole idea, this can even flow into that, I can think of a couple of situations that happened years ago in the YouTube community because I've been on YouTube for over a decade. So years ago, I remember there was this brand new witch who started a channel, and they were sort of trying to share / teach their experiences. And there was the older witches, although they were younger than me, who had been on YouTube for some years, but less than me, who then started, berating this person for starting a channel and trying to teach when they didn't know enough themselves. And they were really going after this individual. So here I sit here. Is it my responsibility to do something, or should I not get involved? It's sort of that thing. Where is that boundary? Is this any of my business?
Right.
Right. And
yeah,
that's, I think, where I struggle.
Yeah, I think that for me, 99% of the time, I'm very much a mind your own business kind of witch in general. There's definitely things that I can't mind my own business about, or I can't bite my tongue about. If we're going to talk about issues about sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, issues like that, I really have no grace for. And, but other issues like the gatekeeping issues within the community, or I feel right now, witch talk is a very hot trending sort of topic in the community. People love witch talk. People hate witch talk. People have feelings about witch talk. Stuff like that. It's I kind of don't care as much. I feel each witch really, we all have our own code of ethics. We all have our own moral compass. We all have, I feel as witches, the wisdom, the intuition, the strength and the energy, the wise blood to be able to make our own decisions about what we are going to feel passionate about and, what battles are ours to be fighting? Or when is it really not your place to be saying something? Because that's something too. I mean, there's some times where, you know, you could do much better by just uplifting people's voices versus speaking for other people.
Right.
So I think it's such a mixed bag. And I mean, I don't think that we can paint this question with just one brush stroke, because I really feel like it would depend, you know, on the circumstance.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think, I guess, you know, I've heard witches say, because we are witch and identify as witch, then we need to be out there fighting the fight, whatever fight that is. But then I guess, you know, I guess that's where it comes up, you know, just because you or I can do something in that situation over there, is that a situation we really want to get involved with? I mean, I do agree, definitely, that if it's a situation or a topic or a circumstance or an event that affects you personally, you know, as a mom, for me, you know, with children who come from an interracial relationship, I have very strong opinions about race. So that would be something I feel very drawn to get involved with. I have a nephew, he's more like my son, who is part of the LGBTQ plus community. So I am definitely an ally, a very strong ally. So those things are things that really, you know, personally are things that I get involved with magically. And then this is where I want to make sure we're talking about it as witch.
Right.
You know, but there are other situations that, I mean, I'm not saying that I am not compassionate towards, but maybe I don't feel directly connected to.
Like, you feel like you can't empathize with?
Well, maybe I can empathize with it, but I'm just not as connected to that situation, like witch talk or whatever.
Yeah.
I have a TikTok account. I post occasionally, but I'm not as involved in it.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily on. I'm on TikTok. You can find me there as 3 Obsidian Eyes. But I'm not really on like. I'm not really on like.
Follow you? I gotta go check that out.
I'm not really on like witch talk, and I don't really post like really much witchy. Like, and I don't even really understand like.
I know
how to use the app. So there's just like random like snippets and clips. But yeah, I think that this question is really hard. I feel like for me to be able to give like the answer I feel like it deserves, because I don't know really what circumstance we're pinpointing here. You know, like I said, like if it comes to discrimination or oppression against any marginalized community, one that I'm a part of or not a part of, for me, I feel like personally that is a big part of my witchcraft, is like liberation, freedom, individuality, the pursuit of happiness, the ability to, you know, grab life by the horns and take control of your own life and, you know, do as thou will and eat the fruit and live abundantly in this life now. So for me, I feel like in those instances, like I said, I feel very, very strongly about it. But like in other instances that are more like petty and like, oh, so-and-so just doesn't like so-and-so. Like that to me is kind of like the whole witch war thing played out. I mean, I think that we've all found ourselves in various situations, but like that to me is really not as big of a deal. And so it would really depend on the situation for me of how I would react.
Right. And I'm even thinking, you know, and I guess it's just this big sort of tangled issue, because I can think of instances where maybe working a magical working or a spell on behalf of someone else in a situation that we may view as needing or benefit from our help may not benefit from our help. Or then there could be witch wars where a witch could be of a minority group that we might want to take their side and help them out. So I guess it would really, maybe in the end, it's just personal personal morality. You know, where do you feel you should get involved, as opposed to, you know, telling someone else because they're witch they should be involved. Maybe it just comes down to something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's
And
the end of the conversation.
no, I think that, like, you know, with like specific examples. So like I can think of an example, okay,
Okay.
to utilize of a time where I got involved when, did I need to get involved? No, I didn't need to. Do I feel like because I am witch, like, so here's the situation, and I'm going to be vague here.
Okay.
But one of the situations I'm thinking about that's fresh in my mind is I have like a longtime friend of mine. We went to school together. We were friends, but as we grew older and got out of high school and through college, we kind of went different ways. Not because there was any bad beef, just life happens, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we've remained in contact and remained good friends, and we've seen each other kind of here and there throughout the years. There is another person involved in this situation who actively went out of their way to threaten this person who I care about. They're not a random stranger, they're a childhood friend. So that's important for this equation too.
Right.
And the victim, being my friend, and their partner, the predator or the perpetrator here, being someone who has had a very disreputable reputation with substance abuse issues and predatory behavior and criminal offenses for over a decade. And I have my own opinions about that person from back when, but I've never, ever, like gone out of my way in any form of like offense or defense or whatever. Like I've always just been like, they're crazy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna stay over here. However, there was a point where the other people in question, one of them being one of my childhood friends, was their safety was threatened, physically threatened, verbally threatened, and their citizenship, which is very much like a mixed bag. And I can't be too specific on live. But the things that were said and the threats that were made were not okay. And I was not okay with. And I personally ended up practicing some divination of my own, because that's normally what I do before spell work. Pretty much any time is, let's pull some cards on this and see what this looks like and see about the outcomes. And for me as a witch, that's how I find out, by listening to my own gods, guides, my cards, whatever. You know, Jasmine, is this really your fight to be fighting? Or right. Are you inserting yourself in a situation where you could potentially be making it messier or worse even by doing magic?
Right.
Because I assume that we're talking about, where do we get involved magically, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So my cards were basically very much indicating to me, and I'm using this RWS system here. So like, it's pretty clear. Like, it's really not up for interpretation. And my cards are basically saying that, like, yes, you should do it, but like, also be careful of what you do, because there could be some really serious consequences for everyone involved. But like, I was getting clear signs that like, this is kind of pushing things in the direction, almost like being a catalyst for the energy, right? Like being a catalyst to start and ignite this wildfire that is going to have some really devastating effects. And so anyway, I chose to do it. And it did. Not necessarily for me. I mean, the work that was done was very strenuous and tiring. And there were really negative effects. But at the end of the day, my friend was protected. So for me, it was worthwhile.
Right.
You know, that's a situation I can think of that, like, I kind of thought, where does this fall in line with me and my craft? And I felt like how I was feeling at the time was if I don't step in and do something as witch to try to help my friend, even by doing more very baneful work, some might consider, I was doing it with good intentions, with the idea that I want to protect and shroud my friend and their family that they've built, you know, from this psycho who's like a known psycho. Like, not just my personal opinion, this person is psycho. That's also like the criminal justice system who like agrees, like mycase.gov, a track sheet. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's an instance where I did get involved. Now, there have been times before where like friends of mine, or I mean, sometimes it just gets messy amongst witches. Sometimes it gets a little bit messy, you know, and witches don't like each other. And then one witch says this, and another one says that. And then this witch is throwing spells and da 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 da. Like that to me is sometimes a little bit silly.
I agree. Yeah, that reminds me of like situations that was when I worked back in Massachusetts at a metaphysical shop, being a reader, one of many readers. And then you have people, you know, like you said, not liking each other. You know, I'll be there with this witch and she'll be telling me about this other reader. And then I'll be there the next day with that other one and they're telling me about this and they're planning on doing whatever they're going to do. Yeah. For me, I felt like that didn't involve me, even though I was a reader in that shop. That whole back and forth, I didn't do anything because I felt like if I were to get in that mix, it would have been, and I guess I could have. I mean, I could have done something, but you know, I was a reader. It wasn't my shop.
Right. And I feel like stuff like that is so fundamentally toxic to the four walls and the culture of any workspace. Like not just a metaphysical store or a fortune shop or whatever, any workspace. If you have employees and management or whatever that is just being toxic, you know, not only does that toxicity build up within that space, but then like there's also, you know, grudges and resentments and cliques that start to form. And I think it's especially dangerous amongst magical groups because it adds in, you know, this other level to it. And I think that ultimately a shop, I mean, you have to be even more careful about who's working there because it's not a coven. It's not, but it almost is kind of the sense that like everyone does need to flow well together. They do. And if you have that one odd person out, whether it's justified or not, like that's really bringing everyone down and it's really going to bring the whole shop down. Like, and it's going to affect business. And I've seen this happen to shops.
Exactly.
So
well, ultimately in this situation, because I refused to choose sides. I ended up being outed or like ousted because then, you know, each of those individuals were talking to the owner, trying to get the other one kicked out. And then because I wasn't choosing sides, I kind of got mixed up in all that and got accused of things that I didn't even do. And I ultimately just left. I left with the owner telling me, well, don't you worry, I'll find out the truth. And I'm like, yes, you will. Good luck with that. And don't you know, years later, she came back to me and apologized. And her and I ended up having our friendship and are still friends to this day now. But it's that toxicity and like you said, and the doing magic when maybe it isn't necessary in that situation. I mean, granted, maybe if I would have taken a side, or maybe if I would have gotten magically involved, I wouldn't have left. But I still might have left anyway because it was just like, yeah, it was just bad.
Yeah, sometimes it's just not your business.
Yeah.
The question also made me think of too, as someone who currently is in an active coven as of the filming of this video, You know, things can always change. I mean, our coven is great now, but I'm just saying, for the sake of immortalizing things on the internet, if someone's watching this film or watching this 8 years from now, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Right,
but,
right.
You know, as of right now, I am in a coven, the Solar Court Coven, running that and everything. That's going well. It's been going on now for over 3 years. So knock on all the wood. I feel like in some ways, you know, we've kind of gone up against some statistics because I've seen a lot of covens, at least in my local area. I'm not saying this is like a scientifically observed statistic, but covens that I've seen in my local area, it's like a lot of them tend to rise and fall within about a 3-year period, which is really interesting. And I don't know if that's something that's across the board, like, or if that's like just maybe my area and like the people in my area or whatnot. I don't actually know, you know, scientifically what the proper statistic is there, or if there's any data or research to actually back that up. But that's just what I've noticed. But when the question we are talking about is like, what is our role in community? For me, being in a coven, you know, and leading this mother coven is like a big part of my role, but it's also very like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like insular, or like within the Solar Court, they would refer to me as an HP, but like that has nothing to do outside the boundaries of the coven. You know what I mean? Like I am not your high priestess. I am not, you know, so-and-so's down the street's high priestess. You know, I am the high priestess to my coven.
Right.
And that's really where that boundary stops. And like, you know, especially from being at the store, teaching classes, being on YouTube, whatever, like some other people will extend that title. I very much think it's an earned title. But I don't personally feel as witch, and as a active current high priestess, I don't feel obligated to be your high priestess when you are not in this tradition.
That makes sense to me.
So I think that that's a big way how my witchcraft affects the community, because also too, like, you know, the way I view community is also sculpted and shaped by the coven. And then there's like, you know, the coven, then there's like outside the coven, you know, there's things that stay within the walls of the coven. There's things that we can share publicly, you know. And so also, if a witch was going through something who's in the coven, who's a coven mate of mine, versus if a witch I don't even know, who I'm just reading something about online, versus if a witch I was very close friends with, but you know, we don't have that coven bond, but we're both witches and we're very close friends, because you can be friends with people and not be in a coven with them.
Exactly.
Like you can have a great friendship. You know, I would like to think that on a humanity level, if their basic human rights were being jeopardized or their safety, then as witch, I feel like more than likely I would react. But if it's petty, low level, just kind of mundane stuff, then I probably wouldn't have a magical reaction. But I would absolutely do my best to hold space on a personal level outside of ritual and magic. You know, like if a witch I've never met before came into my inbox and was like, hey, you know, I had on a pentacle necklace and, you know, my job told me I need to hide that or not wear it. And I noticed that you wear a pentacle necklace publicly, and I wasn't sure about how you've navigated, you know, workforce, occupational, like I would sympathize with that, even though I don't even know this witch.
Right.
You know, so it's very circumstantial, I feel like.
But would you get involved in magically in that witch's situation?
That situation, I feel like it would depend on how the conversation would go.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I was thinking too.
It would depend on how the conversation would go. I want to say too, just for the record, because I've had a lot of this on my channel recently, and I just want to say again too, like I don't do spell work for my job. That's not what I do. That's not a part of what I do. There's nothing wrong with witches who do that, but like if you come to me and say, hey, can you do a blockbuster or a road opener or a sugar or that on my boss to let me wear a pentacle, I'm not going to send you an invoice because that's not what I do. What I would do is offer them a reading and then give them like a witchy prescription of how they can craft their way out of their own situation. So that's
And
probably what I would do.
same thing. I do the same thing.
Yeah, that's probably what I would do, because even at work, like when we do readings, like we have people frequently who be like, hey, you know, they want to come in, they want to, you know, pay the money, they want to pay $200, $300, $400, $600, $800, and they want that. And it's like, you can get all the stuff here and go do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I have done stuff before in the past of like doing vigil events where people can purchase novena candles from the shop, and then they can write their petition, and then for a fee they can allow it to burn in our place, you know, so we burn it all the way through, like our magical kind of understanding encourages us to. So like if you don't feel comfortable, some people have kids, cats, whatever, you know what I mean? And they can dress the candle there and everything, and they can pay for a fee, but we're not really doing the work for you. It's you doing the work. We're creating a space to hold your magic in for you if you feel like, you know, your husband or wife or partner or kids or cat, or, I mean, because also too, like, let's be real here, having space to do certain types of magic is a privilege.
Right.
Having
It's
tools
almost like
is a privilege.
Right. It's making me think, like, in your situation there, it's almost as if you've cast circle and you're allowing them to do their magic within your circle that you've cast for them.
Mm-hmm. And then
it's very similar to that.
Yeah. And then what we do after that is, like, you know, the candles will burn all the way through, and then the candles will be red for the person. So that's also kind of like part of the total fee, is like you buy the novena, you pay the fee to have it done, you get the stuff to dress it, anoint it, you pay to have it there, and then you pay to have it read.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, depending on the novena and everything, you might end up, you know, being good, signed, sealed, and delivered, or you might, like, depending on how the candle has burned and how much soot there is, and it's visible. You know what I mean? Like, it's really, with the novena divination, there's really, it's not like woo woo. It's literally clear, or it's black. The glass is shattered. The candle is burnt all the way through, or it didn't. You know what I mean? Like, it's very like, here's what's going on, and here's what you can do now.
Right.
So
I want to look at the comments. There was a lot of comments going on. Let's see. So yeah, Shadow Sun says, I feel like as a witch, it's important to advocate and stand up for groups, especially if we have a personal connection to these groups, such as the LGBT plus or other marginalized community. And that's almost like you were saying, Jasmine, like when a person's basic rights are being negated, there is a feeling of, as witch, getting involved magically to help or advocate for that individual.
Yeah, and I would say too, and I know that, like, unfortunately, I know that not all witches are going to agree with me here, which I think is really sad. But I feel like I don't know how. I have a hard time respecting any witch who would be able to sit on the wayside when that sort of thing is going on. Like, I would have a hard time really taking a witch seriously or really having much respect for her if you're okay with your brother being lynched down the street.
Oh, right. Right.
And, like, you don't want to do anything in the physical, the digital, or the astral. Like, it's, to me, that's very reminiscent of, like, what is the quote? Talking about Jewish persecution, where, like, they came for them first, but it wasn't me. Then they came for them first. Like, and I'm misquoting here, but do you know what I'm talking about? Like, they came for them first, but it wasn't me. And then they came for them, but that wasn't me. And then eventually they came for the person saying the quote.
I don't recognize the quote, but I understand the idea behind it.
Okay. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like, I feel like, yeah.
I agree with the whole idea too of doing divination, and I do that as well before doing any magical working, because I may myself, in my own experience, I have, like, gotten really excited, not necessarily yay excited, but, you know, energy flowing, thinking, okay, this is the situation that's going on. I am going to do a magical working or a spell for this situation. I know exactly in my head, I can think of, okay, I'm going to do this. And then I pull cards and the cards are like, well, CricketSong, do you really want to do that? Or do you really want to do it that way? Maybe you should rethink this. Maybe you're getting super excited about this and it really isn't your place to be doing XYZ for this. Or not doing it now. Take a step back because something's already in play. And tomorrow, or when you planned on doing it, circumstances have already shifted and you might want to address it in a different way. That's happened for me as well.
Yeah.
So yes, I think
too.
divination is key. What else? People talking about covens. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was just talking about the covens, and that was kind of like a side thing.
Yeah, the only reason I even brought that up was because, you know, we were talking about like our magical siblings, our magical brothers and sisters, and like,
yes,
when would we react magically? And I was saying, you know, it would very much differ for me of how quickly or how I would react based on my relationship to you. But fundamentally, as witch, I feel like I overarchingly care about your, regardless of who you are or how much we agree or disagree, as witch, I care about your basic human rights and liberties.
Yeah, I agree.
Just by the basis of being a witch alone. That doesn't mean I like you, though. That means I believe that you have the pursuit to happiness and that you should be granted freedom and individuality and liberty and all of those things.
I agree.
So, and regardless of my relation to you. But my reaction and maybe how quick I would react would likely depend on my relationship to you or to the situation.
Right. I agree. Definitely. Because once you're a part of a coven, whether you're a leader in the coven or whether you're just a member of the coven, your relationship magically to those individuals is going to be a lot tighter and closer than just a witch you know in the community even or online or whatever. I agree. I agree.
And there's also been times too, even from within the coven, where, you know, we have had our own disagreements of, you know, so-and-so is thinking of doing X, Y, and Z, but then so-and-so is like, I don't like when we're talking about group work, right?
Yes.
Because we definitely have our own solitary individual practices that are not necessarily restricted in any way, but there are oaths and stuff that we kind of operate on a certain code, right? And frequency. But like ultimately, you can do a lot of things as as almost still kind of like a solitary practitioner outside of the coven. Right. And then there's times where there's group time. And so there have been disagreements of like, you know, things that are going on, whether it be in our local community or just the United States, where it's like, so-and-so is thinking we need to do X, Y, and Z, but then so-and-so over here is like, I think that's a terrible idea. And then so it's like navigating that space, doing divination as a group, working it through as a group and figuring out like, okay, if one of us isn't super on board with doing this as group work, do we need to be doing it as group work?
Yes, I have had that very situation in the past when I was a leader of a coven as well. It didn't turn out very well, but yes, that can be a very sticky situation. Yeah. Anyway, bad memories, bad experiences for me there. Solveig, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce Solveig.
I feel like it's
Solveig. Oh, that wasn't the one. This was the thing. Personal relationships carry power, and everyone deserves respect and an offering of hope and prosperity. I agree. Oh, hey. I know this isn't quite on topic, but any suggestions for online resources on storm magic? I don't have any.
I don't know if I have like any, I have experiences, but I don't know if I have any of like resources I could list off the top of my head, like as far as books or podcasts or videos or stuff for you at this time. But I could probably find some resources and send you some information. I mean, I have my own experiences with storms, and the magic of that, but I don't think that's quite what you're asking for.
Right. So, yeah, so going with your idea when you were talking about the coven and, you know, sort of responsibility to our brothers and sisters, I guess when I ask the question, are we our sisters and brothers keepers? It's almost like, you know, are we responsible for what other witches in the community, whether that's online, whether that's in person, you know, in a coven situation, that's going to be very different, at least from my opinion. If you're a member of the coven, you know, every member of the coven is the face of that coven.
Mm-hmm.
And if one member of that coven does something, it's going to reflect on the group. Mm-hmm. For me personally, that's how I view that. Yeah, you
Same. 100%. And 100%. And I have had members, because of actions that I have done, I have had people get upset with me before and, you know, leave the coven. And, you know, I feel like, see ya.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean.
Well, and I'm sure you respect their choice. I mean, yes. At least as the high priestess of the coven that I ran, and I had people come and go. I think our coven ran for 5 years, from 2011 to 2000.
See, and I think that's really great. Like, regardless of whether it's a running one or not, like that's really cool. Cause like I said, I don't know if there's any data on this anywhere, but just from what I've seen, it seems like 3 years is kind of like the curve or the tipping point.
Well, I think it took us 3 years to get a good, stable membership. But anyway, maybe we could talk covens another time because
but going back to your question, you know, I feel like you said, the coven thing's very different. Yes, I agree with you 100%. Every single person in the coven represents the coven. I don't know what you have or haven't seen from my channel, but I've been very active in the physical and in the digital and in the astral. And one of the big things that I did over the summer was working with ND10. And ND10 is our chapter of Black Lives Matter. And this is a prime example of how I reacted. So things are going on, things have been going on. I personally felt like it was my duty as witch to attempt to help and aid and support the ND10 and what they were doing. And so what I did was I took $100 of my own cash and I bought 100 novenas. And then I designed the novenas with a thing that says Hex and Justice on it. And then it has the map of Indianapolis with a, I don't know if I can curse on here or not, so I won't, but the 12 sigil placed over the map of Indianapolis. And, you know, I posted about it, advertised it. And the intention was for everyone to light these novenas, specifically the night of the strawberry moon back in June of last year. And I was very clear with everybody that these candles were charity candles. They were just going to be $10 cash or 11 card. And I was going to take 100% of those proceeds, not 20, not 30, not 80%, 100%, because that's really at this time, it's blood money. And if I were to take that, I feel like the spirits would hand it to me in the astral. And that's not in my ethics anyway, but I'm just saying. So we ended up writing a check to ND10, but that was one way that we helped. You know, there were also times where I was downtown, like bringing bringing stuff downtown to help the first aid and what was going on. Our coven did stuff to also help what was going on, you know? And so that was a big way that I felt the need to take care of my community magically, but not necessarily attached to specifically the witchy community, my local community. I mean, because these people, there's plenty of who aren't witches who this was benefiting.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
right.
I mean, that's a really big way for me. And that's a really, you know, trying to do that in the digital, the physical, and the astral, and hitting all three separate of these planes, I think is what really makes it what it is. And, you know, I've also made videos before in the past of some of the nonsense that's gone in our local community ones. I think I tend to focus a little bit more locally because that's where my eyes are so often, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, that's the community that you directly physically interact with. I mean, I think that's like human nature. I mean, the people you interact with on a daily basis, you tend to establish more of a energetic connection in physical proximity.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. Not saying that you can't have community online either, but when we're in physical interaction, when we're interacting with the same land and the same bodies in that area, there is a connection there.
Well, and did you, I think you might have saw some of it, because I think I saw one of your comments, but my 3-part video series about the Indianapolis pagan community.
That's what inspired me to talk about this topic. And that's what I was I watched one of your topics and I'm like, oh, one of your videos. I watched all 3, but this is when I'm like, you know what, that topic I want to talk about with her.
Yes.
Because this is exactly what I was talking about, you know, how involved do we get?
Yes. And, you know, that is something that like I can talk freely about too. 100%. So in a nutshell, for those of you who might not know, there's 3 videos. I don't know if I remember the titles. One of them is I Said What I Said. But you'll find them. They're like pretty chronological. There's 3 videos. Anyway, in a nutshell, because I don't want to take up too much time with this part of it, but in a nutshell, here in Indianapolis, we have a thing called the CIC. The CIC is the Center for Interfaith Community. Every 3 years, there's a representative that gets elected to represent a various religious community. So various different religions have a rep. Pagans have a rep. So I'm specifically talking about pagans here. So no, that's not necessarily synonymous with witch. There's a lot of pagans in our community who practice witchcraft. Yes, but for the sake of this conversation, this is less about witch and it was more about pagan. So it was time for a new rep to be selected. The current rep, the old rep, because she's gone now, but at that time, the current rep was really acting out, going through a lot, losing her mind, her manners, and her marbles, and really just on a power trip. Very manipulative, very shady. I talk about it in the video. And then the other 2 people, because it's a position that you get nominated for, right? So the other 2 people who were in the running were directly affiliated with this whole group who was trying to control the whole situation and, you know, trying to control who was going to get elected. And our 2 choices were a known sexual predator or a known racist.
Oh my gosh.
Those were our 2 choices. Those were our 2 choices. So someone else, you know, I basically was this catalyst and sparked this whole fire. And the conclave, the group, really didn't even have that many members in it up until I joined, and then went through my whole list on social media and sent out, you know, like an election. I was sending out things like, hey, do you know that this is going on? And and I was sending stuff out to witches in my community. Everyone's piling in, of course, and joining. And we nominated a new person, someone who wasn't originally, which that really made the conclave very angry, because of course they were trying to manipulate and control. And these 2 people are friends. too, who were nominees, you know, like it was a whole clique. And so basically it was like overthrowing this whole conclave situation. And, you know, in some ways I got some backlash, community wise from that, because I was speaking up against it. And so were many other people too. But I was kind of the catalyst. I was like, Jasmyne started this kind of thing, even though it was a community, like we were raising our voices as the people. So
right.
So I don't feel like I can really take credit for that. And on a magical level, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Every king needs a kingmaker. Let me just say that.
This is an interesting question. So Warren Peace wants to know, okay, what's your opinion on male witches, specifically how to respond to those who say that men can't be witches and should keep their nose out of a woman's business? What are your thoughts on this?
Now, I love this question.
Right, because I do think that this sort of ties into what we're talking about. You know, where is the boundary?
Are you asking me now?
Oh, sure. What do you think?
So what is my opinion of male witches? I don't necessarily have an opinion on male witches. I recognize their existence and have no issue with their existence in the craft whatsoever. And I was having a conversation about this actually with a friend of mine and another YouTuber, Nerdy Warlock, having a conversation with them about this, but specifically how to respond to say that men can't be witches and should keep their nose out of women's business. What are your thoughts on this? I think that if you are someone who identifies as male, you're more than welcome to practice the craft. And I don't necessarily think that there's anything actually keeping you from it. You know, there might be facets of the craft that might be sectioned off, theoretically speaking. Like there are certain traditions that are actually men only, believe it or not. So I don't know why people insinuate that the craft is for women only when there are specific male only traditions of the craft. So I don't know why that is. Just like there are specific women's only traditions, there's also specific queer only traditions. Mm-hmm. You know, there's gay only traditions. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong or false about a male practicing witchcraft or a male witch. And how would I respond to them? If I think about this in the lens of like for myself, if someone was being problematic about a male practicing witchcraft, I really probably wouldn't entertain that person because that's not really a witch that I would associate with. Right. I mean, what about Christopher Penczak? What about Scott Cunningham? What about Aleister Crowley? Right. What about Anton LaVey? Right. Like, I'm not saying that all these people are ideal representations of great people, but I am saying that, like, there are founding fathers in the craft. What about Gerald Gardner? Like, whether you love him or hate him, there have always been men in the craft. Alexander Sanders. And you can keep going on, right? I think to consider witchcraft only, witchcraft being a woman's business only, I think is sort of a limited perspective on witchcraft. I do think there may be facets of witchcraft or magical practice even that are focused on women's energy or feminine energy, but you don't have to be a woman to have feminine energy. But there may be there are plenty of men out there who are queens, very feminine. Yes, and there are women who are very masculine. Yes. Yes. But I do, like you pointed out, there are traditions that are gender specific. But if that doesn't float your boat, then you just don't join that tradition. Exactly. You know? Yeah. Exactly. And I want to say something else about that. Go right ahead. Okay, per conversation I was having. So a while back ago, sometime last year, I was approached by someone who wanted to teach classes at the store. And the person who wanted to teach classes, they are a cis male, and they wanted to teach classes. And I was like, okay, like, pull out your material, like, let's have a conversation, blah, blah, blah. Well, their hesitation about teaching classes and stepping more into, you know, even though they're not running a coven, if you're instructing occult or divination based classes, that's still kind of a leadership role in the community.
Mm-hmm.
But they were worried that because they are a masculine, cis male, or more presenting masculine, that they wouldn't necessarily have a big turnout, that people wouldn't respect them right off at the bat because they are male. You know, they don't have like a stereotypical witchy look to them, you know, da 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 da. And I want to say this, and I'm going to say this respectfully. Okay. It's a mixed bag for me because on one hand, I do think that women or feminine people sometimes do have higher privileges in the craft than men do. And I'm not saying that that's great or that's valid. That's a fact of life. Okay. That's just a fact of it that, you know, I would say probably about 80% of the people who come into our store are women. Now, I'm not saying men can. That's just how it happens. I can take a look at my YouTube's analytics, you know, 90 something percent. Last time I checked for the last 28-day cycle, 90 something percent are women.
You know, interesting enough, mine are 50-50, almost exactly.
Yeah, mine is very high on the women's side.
That's weird, huh?
Very, very high on the women's side. So like I said, I'm not saying that that's, you know, I'm not saying like cheers to that. I'm just saying like this is a thing. But I also think too, talking about privileges, you know, there are so many spaces where the man's voice is always heard first and foremost. So I think men are also hyper sensitive to it in some ways because they're not instantly respected and heard just because they're a masculine male. They don't walk into the craft and instantly get respect. And I don't think anyone actually does. But I think that sometimes men have a perceived notion in their own mind that their voice isn't going to be as heard or as respected. You know what I mean? When really everyone's voice that respect is earned in the craft, regardless, in my opinion.
I wonder if some of that, I mean, I'm thinking of different sort of magical practices when we're talking about specifically witchcraft as opposed to ceremonial magic. Because from my perspective, in my lens, ceremonial magic tends to be more masculine, where witchcraft, folk magic, from my perspective, tends to be more feminine. You know, the midwives, the ones doing, you know, the herbology kind of thing, where the ceremonial magic, Aleister Crowley, that kind of thing speaks to me more masculine. But that's just my perspective too. It's interesting. We have about 5 minutes left. So I don't even know if we came to an answer other than the idea that we or individual witches should check in with their own moral compass to decide where that line lies for them. You know, when should we get involved? Where is the boundary? Are we our brothers and sisters keepers? Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should always do something in every situation. I think you and I agree divination is a big part of checking in with that, to decide, at least for each of us, you know, that seems to be a compass for us.
You know, and I think my answer to everything that you just said is simply yes. That's just my answer. Like, are we our brother's keeper? Are we not our brother's keeper?
Oh, I
are
see.
we responsible for this?
Okay,
like,
yeah.
As far as like this, or like it's just yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's definitely, I like the idea of looking at, you know, your moral compass. Because if I feel that it's important for me to get involved with something, you may feel it's not something you would get involved in, as opposed to there may be something that you feel definitely encouraged to go do something magically, where I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's something I want to touch. Because I think it involves our own relationship with the issue or the person or the situation or
Well,
our
there's all,
personal experiences with whatever's going on too.
I think there's also times too where we have to be honest with ourselves as witches is, you know, is magic really the way to solve this issue? Like, because, you know, if we're going to get involved, do we always necessarily need to get involved magically? You know, sometimes we really can handle things with just pen and paper, like in a non-magical way.
Well, my only my only thought on that is everything I do is an act of magic. As witch, everything is an act of magic. So if I'm going to get involved, on some level, it's going to be energy manipulation.
Let me rephrase myself then. Let me rephrase myself, because I do agree that as witches, everything we do is magic. I don't think everything needs to be like ceremonial.
Okay, I will
agree. Let me rephrase. I don't think that everything needs to be even ritualistic. You know what I mean?
I agree with that. I agree.
Like magic is magic, and fundamentally we are magic. And I want to make that clear. I do agree there with you. But I think what I meant to say and what I should have said was not everything needs to be ceremonial or ritualistic.
I agree with that. Like, you know, yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that because a lot of my stuff isn't. But anyway, all right. So next week, I know I have a scheduled show next week. I don't even remember what it is, but I know 2 weeks out, I think we're all scheduled already. Let's take a look at it. Content. So not next week, the next time, which looks like it is February. Nope, this is that one. March 13th. Oh, yeah. March 13th. That's right. Obsidian Fire and I are going to do a show on March 13th, so mark your calendars. Not sure what our topic is yet, but she carved some time out from her schedule, so her and I are going to be, I know, I'm super excited.
You guys have such great chemistry.
I think so too. She's a near and dear friend.
Yeah.
We've never met in person, but we talk quite frequently on video chat. So yeah. Yes. So March 13th, mark your calendar. And then I think I have Shadow Sun scheduled. And then of course I'm going to touch base with you again to see when you're free again.
Yeah. And Shadow Sun is awesome too.
Yes, she is. She was in the chat. I don't know if she still is, but her and I'm not sure what we're talking about, but yes. And then Jasmyne, of course, is an awesome person too. So we're going to have her back too, because I enjoy talking with her. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you if you're watching this on my channel. Yeah. So until next time, much love.
Thanks.
Blessed be.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.